today's mindful moment. All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating today. We're talking about Henry V.
Oh, yeah?
But not the, the Shakespearean kind of romanticized version.
Right.
We're talking about the real guy.
Mm-hmm.
And we're using Dan Jones's biography, Henry V, The Astonishing Triumph, to kind of guide our deep dive here.
Great book.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. We think about Henry V and we often think about Agincourt,
Yeah, victory.
Yeah, huge triumph. But his life was just soaked in violence.
Right from the beginning. I mean, just think about it. He was born just a few years after, 6 years after, his father took the throne.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you can imagine, like, inheriting this world of just constant unrest, rebellions simmering everywhere.
Yeah, it was a pressure cooker.
Absolutely.
It's hard to imagine. And Jones talks about how, like, when he was just a kid, 10 years old, Henry was sent to Wales.
Oh, wow.
To try to help put down a rebellion led by Owain Glyndwr. And that's not just like a royal field trip, right? This is like you are thrust into the middle of this really brutal conflict.
And even more than just being there, like Jones highlights this chilling detail that as a child, Henry ordered the execution of some captured rebels.
Wow.
So young. And it just raises these questions. Was that like, a sign of just like ruthlessness, almost like he was born with it?
Right.
Or was it just like, pragmatism in this insane world where he had to make tough decisions?
I mean, what does that do to a kid,
mm-hmm.
right? To see that and to be a part of that.
It's going to shape you.
Yeah. It makes you think about, psychology of growing up in that. And then, he's got the Battle of Shrewsbury when he's 16 years old, which almost like ended his life before it really even began.
A huge turning point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's fighting alongside his father against Henry Hotspur Percy, who was like a legendary knight. Think Game of Thrones. Like the drama is high.
Oh, yeah.
And amidst all of this chaos, Henry gets hit with an arrow, like right in the skull.
Oh, my.
Gruesome injury. And Jones's account of the surgery that this guy, John Bradmore, has to perform is wild.
I mean, can you imagine?
Without anesthesia.
No.
Yeah.
That had to have been excruciating.
It speaks to his resilience, right? Like, to go through that and come out on the other side, physically and mentally, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But it also makes you wonder, right? Did that experience desensitize him to violence in some way? Did it contribute to his willingness to, do some of the things he did later on?
Yeah.
Tough questions.
Something to think about. But, it's interesting. He's not just this, like, battle-hardened warrior.
Right.
Jones paints this picture of a much more nuanced guy. Like, he was very religious, very intellectual.
Yeah, he was really into the Book of Deuteronomy.
Interesting.
Especially those laws of war. And it makes you wonder, was he trying to uphold divine justice? Or was he using scripture to kind of justify his own ambition?
Yeah.
That tension between faith and power is so fascinating.
And it kind of explodes that traditional warrior king image, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, Jones talks about how he was a patron of the arts. He commissioned work from Geoffrey Chaucer's son. He was into literature, history, romance. Doesn't sound like the typical bloodthirsty tyrant, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very different picture.
He even, oversaw this construction of a meditative retreat at Kenilworth Castle.
Oh, wow.
Which suggests that he was seeking some kind of peace and solace amidst all this chaos. Like, he needed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It challenges our assumptions, right?
Totally.
About who he was. It makes us look beyond the battlefield. But we can't ignore, of course, the events that really made him a legend, like the tennis ball incident, for example.
Oh, right.
Was that like a real insult from the French? Or was it, clever propaganda?
Well, the story goes that the French Dauphin sends him tennis balls, basically saying, you're more fit for games than war.
Oh, wow.
And it really fuels Henry's rage. It definitely fuels his determination to conquer France. I mean, it's like a scene out of Shakespeare, right?
Right.
It's almost too perfect to be true.
And that's kind of the point Jones is making.
Oh.
Was it a real act of disrespect? Or was this a calculated move to, like, fire up English patriotism and kind of create a justification for war?
Yeah.
We still debate it, but whether real or fake, the tennis ball incident becomes this powerful symbol that sets the stage for one of the most decisive battles in English history.
Agincourt.
Yeah, it really, kind of made his reputation, that battle, as this brilliant military strategist.
Yeah.
But it also kind of shows us like a darker side,
Right,
right?
absolutely.
To his leadership. Jones talks about this, pretty brutal decision to massacre French prisoners.
It's chilling, yeah. And Jones does try to offer, some context, some possible explanations for his actions. But it's definitely a stain.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the cost of victory.
Yeah. No, totally. And you see this, that pragmatism, I guess, even more so when you look at his siege warfare. Like, take the siege of Rouen.
Yeah.
Masterclass in strategy.
Right.
But it also, led to just mass starvation among civilians.
I mean, at what point does it become too much, right?
Right.
Even in a medieval context.
Yeah. Was it calculated?
Right.
Was it just the reality of,
Yeah.
It's a hard question. And Jones, I think, does a good job of acknowledging those complexities.
He does. So he's, having these victories on the continent, but back home, things aren't totally safe either.
Oh, yeah. The Southampton plot. His own cousin, Richard of Cambridge, trying to overthrow him.
Wow.
It just shows that even at the height of his power, his position was still so fragile.
Power's a precarious thing.
It is. It really is.
Always somebody waiting,
Yeah.
to take advantage.
Always.
And Henry's response to that was brutal. He was not messing around.
Nope. He was serious about securing that dynasty. Yeah. And maybe that kind of feeds into this this whole thing with the crusade, right?
Oh, yeah. So Jones talks about that. Henry had this ambition to launch a crusade to Jerusalem.
He was planning it out, meticulously. The reconnaissance, the logistics.
Wow. What if?
Big what if moment in history.
What if he had done that? Was it religious zeal? Was it wanting to secure his place in history as, a holy warrior?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it just savvy politics?
It's hard to say for sure, but Jones kind of leans towards, it was probably all of that mixed together.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Of course, we'll never know. He dies young, right?
35.
35 years old.
Crazy. Just like that, it's over.
Everything just thrown into disarray.
And he leaves behind an infant son to take over.
Yeah.
Henry VI.
Yeah.
And this war in France that's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Talk about a tough act to follow.
Totally. I mean, his legacy is complicated, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, he was a brilliant leader.
Yeah.
Charismatic, expanded England's power.
Yeah.
But he could be ruthless, cruel.
Yeah. A lot of people died to get him to those goals.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's that duality.
It's what makes him so interesting to study.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Jones does a great job of, showing that.
Doesn't shy away from the tough stuff.
He doesn't. It's he was a hero, but he was also capable of really terrible things.
Right.
And you have to kind of hold both of those ideas in your mind when you're thinking about them.
It's a reminder, right? We got to look past those romanticized versions.
Yes.
To see the real people.
Yeah.
Behind the myths.
It's almost kind of tragic in a way.
Yeah.
This meteoric rise and then this cut short.
It really makes you think about those long-term consequences, right? Did his ambitions actually kind of set England up for, problems later on?
Yeah.
Or did the guys who came after him just not take advantage of what he built?
Big questions. Historians are still fighting about it. But let's shift gears a little bit. Talk about his impact on England itself. I mean, it's easy to get lost in the battles, the 100 Years' War, all that.
Yeah.
But Henry also made some pretty significant changes back home.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was really big on law and order,
Mm-hmm.
cracking down on dissent, really trying to solidify the power of the king.
He was not messing around.
Nope.
Especially with the Lollards, that religious reform movement.
Oh, right.
They faced some pretty harsh persecution under Henry. Jones talks about how he was totally committed to, the traditional church, saw them as a threat.
Makes sense.
To the whole, to stability.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like his military strategy, right?
Yeah.
Just decisive, uncompromising,
and
sometimes brutal. But there's this other side to his domestic policy that's interesting too, promoting the English language.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. He really pushed to elevate English.
Yeah, in government, official documents.
It's a big shift away from French and Latin.
Huge. It was a smart move, politically and culturally.
Yeah.
He's trying to create this sense of national unity.
Yeah, with everyone fighting a common enemy.
Exactly.
And language can do that.
Oh, totally. It's power.
It can really become a symbol. And Henry understood that.
Yeah.
He wasn't just a warrior. He was a like a nation builder, shaping culture.
It's what makes his legacy so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
All these contradictions.
Yeah. Brilliant strategist, but also ruthless. Devout Christian, but also really good at, like, manipulating people.
Totally. And Dan Jones, he does a great job of showing all of that.
He doesn't shy away from the tough stuff. It's like, yeah, here's the heroic stuff, but here's also
the reality.
Yeah, you got to look at both sides.
Right. Reminds us that history is not like black and white.
Nope.
Even the most famous people, they're complicated.
Absolutely. Well, if you're interested in learning more about Henry V,
definitely check out the book.
Henry V, The Astonishing Triumph by Dan Jones. It'll really make you think.
It's a good one.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the life of Henry V. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to the deep dive for more, explorations into all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, we cover a lot of ground.
We do. And if you like this episode, please share it with your friends. Leave us a review.
Let us know what you think.
We always love to hear from you. You'll find a link to purchase the book in the show notes.